So I'm Charles Kaplan, and Janice wrote me into this. And so she said I'm not allowed to talk about like a long list of things. No porn, no politics, no packet capturing. And I'm like, look, you just took out like 90% of what I do every day. So really, this was the only thing left I could come up with that I thought might be loosely interesting to this group. So, young geeky me, age 13, very socially challenged is the word I like to use. Very introverted. I had just upgraded from a 300 baud to a 1200 baud modem. It was a great $999 investment right there. And I still remember how much I paid for that, yes, because that's an insane amount of money for 1200 baud modem. But basically, there was no MIT lock-picking guide yet at the time, and I had nothing else to do. So I thought, this is like any other hacker kind of challenge. Like someone locked the door. I really, really, really want to know what's on the other side of it. Just like, there's this encrypted Wi-Fi network. I really, really want to know if there's something good on it. I don't actually need to use what's on the network or, steal what's behind the door. I just really, really, really want to know what's behind it. So, I rode my bike like 7 miles to the public library and I looked for books on, lockpicking and didn't really find much of anything. And, then you're watching TV at 2 in the morning and there are these trade schools that say, learn to be a locksmith. And they had ones like learn to like sharpen saw blades and learn to like do all these other great things. So I thought, I'm going to do that. Because I live in the middle of nowhere, and this will be interesting. And so for like $500, and I had to register under a fake name because I didn't want my parents to know about this. The stuff shows up in the mail. I think they're going to figure it out, but at the time it seemed like a good idea to use a fake name. So I had to bike to the bank and get a money order, right? Because how do you pay for this stuff when you're age 13? But nonetheless, this company like ships me, a bunch of locks and lock picks and instructions on, what to start doing. And I just found this tremendously fascinating. Nowadays it's great with the internet. We can go online. There's lots of resources to read. Tools of the trade are readily available on everywhere from eBay on. But over the years, I made keys for my entire high school, my entire college dorm. I took apart, reverse engineered the master key system. It's very useful from time to time. I've opened doors on 2 different Air Force facilities, much to the chagrin of the security departments on those bases. It's just really, really fun. And now, you can go to DEF CON. There's always a locksmith village, so there are people there that will help guide you and teach you along the way. New or newer kind of techniques around lock opening, particularly around lock bumping, which is kind of cheating, but can be a good party trick if nothing else. Like, hey, let me show you how easy it is to open the front door to your house. And you don't want to have to sit there for 1 to 20 minutes picking a lock pin by pin when you can just open the door in 15 seconds with bump keys. But nonetheless, it's something that I've found over the years to be very interesting, have a tremendous number of parallels to the way a lot of us think about analyzing a packet trace or trying to break the security to get into someone's network. It's the same kind of concept, the same kind of mental challenge of, I really want to know what's there. I've found it interesting for years. Over time, I've tried to extend to gain better knowledge of, how do combination locks and safes and things of that nature work. I find that maybe it's because I drink too much caffeine, I don't know, but it's just not an area where I have a great skill, but I'm always constantly enamored when I go to events sometimes, and I do watch people, quite literally open a safe, cold, blind. And it's like any other skill. With practice, you can become really good at it. And, I would encourage, all of you to, go online, download the MIT lockpicking guide if you haven't, read through it, order a couple of lockpicks, and just practice on your own front door, because it's just amazingly useful. You're stuck in an elevator with a hot woman and, you accidentally break the elevator. And now you're both stuck in there together. I don't know. It's more of a Ted Kennedy kind of thing, but who knows? Anyway, I see that my time is basically up, but it's something I've found very exciting, and I encourage all of you to dig into it more. So thank you.
I saw the last title, I saw the Why Locksmith 13. My first impression is, you want to break into your parents' liquor cabinet. I would have done it if my parents had liquor cabinet. Anyway, so my topic is Underachieving Genius Club. Originally was going to call it the Genius Bias. Then I thought, this title sounds like a much better name for my imaginary band. So I'm going to stick with that for now. So come to think of it, why did I pick this title? Because if we think about it, who belongs to this club? If anyone's parents ever told them, you're so smart, you would do so much better if you just tried a little bit harder. So that pretty much puts almost all of us into that club. Almost all of our kids in that club, our grandkids into that club. And the funny thing is we seem to favor something we have no control over, which is natural born talent over hard work. And if you ask anyone that, they will immediately deny it, because if you go to an interview, on your resume even, you will say, what's your best quality? Oh, I'm a hard worker. But if you're the interviewer, you'll be looking at it going, I have a person with a natural talent for, packet tracing or being a marketing manager. And I have someone who told me that they just graduated, they're a very hard worker, they do 2 jobs, and they somehow managed to get a degree. We seem to unconsciously lean towards the person who said they have natural talent. So if you heard phrases that says talent is overrated, kind of is, because you have someone who come to you and say, this is my maximum baseline for what I can do. I was born with this, and this is what I'm sticking to. To someone else that comes along and say, I didn't know this 5 months ago, or I didn't know this a year ago. I just graduated. But I find this very interesting. I seem to have more curiosity about this, exploring this. So it is to our advantage to kind of recognize we have this genius bias. We have this bias when we favor people who thinks they have natural talent, and we even compliment people that way. You're so good at this. You are natural. You must be born with this, genius. You must be born to be a network engineer. You must be born to be a musician. We're not. None of us are. In fact, if you think about the talents that you have, how you fell into what you do right now, think about your other hobbies. You weren't born with this. You may have interests, you may have people in your life that encourage you to explore and find out what you're good at, and you become good at it. You become much better at it. It became your hobby. Some people might even have a second job, if you will, after you get out of technology to become a musician, become a chef, or whatever it is that you think that you might want to do outside of technology. So in the Underachieving a Genius Club, I want to just kind of make us remember, if we are to compliment someone, to say, oh, you are so good at something, or someone who achieved something great, even, our own kids, they got an award. I don't even want to get into the topic of how kids get award for anything nowadays, but you know what I mean. So get an award for showing up. So we don't want to say you're smart. That's a great compliment, but immediately we get the impression is, wow, if I can do this, then I'm smart, but I don't know how to do the next step. So if I try to do the next step, everybody would know that I wasn't a genius. I just fluked out. I got lucky. So what do? Well, you see, some kids just go ahead and say, you know what, I'm not even going to try. I'd rather be known as lazy than be known as stupid. You have other people that go ahead and say, well, maybe I'll just try really hard at home quietly, but don't tell anyone, and I'll show up and ace this exam, and everybody think I'm a genius. And I keep that illusion. And rest of us realize that this is really damaging to all of us, because we see someone really good at something, we have the misunderstanding that they didn't have to try at all. They're just naturally good at this. I must be terrible. So why am I even in this field? So in this title of Underachieving Genius Club, since we're pretty much all a member of it, we want to just remember, talent is just the baseline. Everything else, hard work, time, life experience, whatever you want to call it, this is the modification that we do on top of it. So none of us will be happy with a computer, for example, out of the box. We all customize it, add to it, change the memory, add more CPU power, change the motherboard, so forth. So people are the same way. So thanks.
Morning, everyone. I'm Neil Pomeroy, and the title up there isn't a typo. There's not supposed to be a space between the A and the F. I want to tell you a personal story about a health crisis I had last year. AFib stands, if you don't know, for atrial fibrillation. If you can say it, that's good. But AFib is where the electrical signals in your heart get all messed up. It's your heart's version of significant packet loss. But last April, I came home from the gym, was working out. I wasn't feeling real well that day, and I sat down in the kitchen, and I took, as I occasionally do, I took my pulse. And I don't know what the look on my face was, but I saw a look on my wife's face. And she just looked at me and said, "Honey, what's wrong?" And I could tell what was wrong, because for years when I take my pulse, I have this pulse rate of 58 to 60 beats a minute. It's great. All of a sudden, this thing was going all over the place. Faster, slower, skipping beats, not good. So I waited 24 hours, didn't change, went to the doctor. So of course, he put me on and gave me an EKG, walked back in a few minutes. He goes, "Yep, Neil, you've got AFib." I said, "Oh, okay, so what's the bad news and the good news?" Well, the bad news is you could have a heart attack or a stroke. So needless to say, he had my attention. And so I said, "Well, what's the good news?" He said, "Well, generally it's treatable." So how do you treat it? Well, they basically, because of the fact that the heart beating irregularly can create blood clots, they put you on a blood thinner for 30 days, and then they do a cardioversion. People know what cardioversion is? Have you ever heard of that? Cardioversion is, I said, well, what's that? And he goes, "We shock you." Shock me. He had my attention again. "You mean the paddle thing?" He said, "Yes." And I said, "I'm not going to be awake for this, am I?" He said, "No, you won't." Whew. Anyhow, so basically, the next 30 days were very, very difficult. AFib affects people differently. For me, it was terribly debilitating. I mean, it was like running your 4-cylinder car on 3 cylinders. And the difficulty was I could hardly go up a flight of stairs without being out of breath. As much as I slept, I felt like I wanted to sleep more. So it was a rough 30 days. But we did the cardioversion, and just a short thing about that is, you're sitting in this chair, and they're going to shock you. So they bring out this big patch, and they put it right here. And then they say, "Okay, Neil, lean forward." And they put this big patch on your back. So depending on your mindset, if you think about it too much, it can kind of bother you. But that's what we had to do. Well, we went through the process. They put me out. Thankfully, anesthetics are great for me. I don't remember a thing, feel a thing. But they did the procedure. We woke up. I looked at it. It didn't work. Did not work. So they had some medicine that they put in the IV and so on. Long story short, all of a sudden, after about 45 minutes more, all of a sudden, the nurse came back in, and she said, "Look, it's back in sinus rhythm." How did that happen? I don't know. But apparently the procedure eventually worked. Well, I tell you all that to say, well, when you have a major health situation which is totally unexpected, it tells the truth about some things. And 2 things I want to say about my experience with it. Number one, I learned some real truth about my heart. As you get as old as I am, you start thinking about, well, how's the plumbing working? One of the things they did after 30 days, they did a full echocardiogram stress test. And that's where they do a sonic view of your heart, look at the blood flows, then put you on a treadmill. And they keep cranking it up, and they look at how you're doing. And the good news was there are no blockages. In fact, they told me I have a very low risk of a heart attack. So I was really thankful for that. I mean, I'm thankful I'm still vertical right now. That's That's a big deal. And then the other thing it tends to do is my wife and I had always talked as we get older that we want to get out of our comfort zones, do things for other people as well as ourselves. And so we've done some things like that this past year. I had an experience where I said, I need to do something for someone else, and I had an opportunity to meet with a gentleman in a hospice situation who was dying. And I took the time to sit and meet with him just to be a friend. And I'll tell you that changed my life. If you want to learn some things about life and death, talk to someone like that in that situation. If you've read Tuesdays with Maury, I think it is. This is my Wednesdays with Dave. So anyhow, I appreciate the opportunity. Today was part of getting out of the comfort zone to come up and share this. So thank you.
Well, good morning. Here to talk about the next big thing. I think we need balance in our lives. We've got very hectic digital lifestyles. My balance comes from analog, large format film photography. As such, I've always been attracted to the ghost towns of the Sierra Nevada. My favorite ghost town of all is Bodie, California, on the eastern slope of the Sierra, just on the other side of Yosemite National Park. But I'm particularly struck by some parallels between Bodie and the 1990s internet boom. Some things that are quite similar. In the 1850s, young men who wanted to make their fortune, get involved on the next big thing, would come to California and get in on the mining claims, get into the gold rush. Okay? Venture capital, in this case from New York and London principally, financed these startups and mining claims so that they could afford the latest technology. Electric power transmission, the first industrial application of it west of the Mississippi River was at Bodie. They ran Pelton water wheel down at Green Creek. They ran it 13 miles over the hills up to the mine to power electric motors or running mine equipment instead of steam locomotives, steam power, which of course had to be powered by coal or by wood. Electric power was so new, the engineers specified that the power lines be laid in a straight line, dead straight, because they were concerned if they went off at an angle, the electric current would jump off the wires. That this inconvenienced some of the residents of the cemetery was no small price to pay to use the latest technology. Now, Bodie went further. They had a 50-circuit human-switched telephone system. So they had telephones within the park. Other people that came out to make their fortune, the Hoover brothers, mining engineers, worked out of Bodie. One of them went on to become the 31st president of the United States. So lots of technology came in. But citizens had to be taking care of their social needs as well. So there was a Methodist church and eventually a Catholic church as well. There were also 65 saloons for this town that grew to over 10,000 residents, and for a short while was the third largest city in California. The saloons came equipped with, in most of them, brothels, betting parlors, pool halls, and not a few opium dens. So there was a lot of diversity in the social life there. And this was complemented by the International Order of Odd Fellows. In their hall, they held dances, visiting theater troupes, other sort of entertainers would come through. They had 24-hour restaurants with seafood brought in daily. Well, if the horses could get through the snow. It was a boom town, the next big thing. Everyone wanted to be a part of it. Problem was, boom's end. The internet boom crashed pretty abruptly here. Bodie did the same. Gold started to peter out. The miners moved on to the next boom. But Mr. Kane, the banker, held the mortgages on almost all the buildings in town. He carefully locked the buildings, most with possessions left behind, because he knew that boom would come back someday. It didn't, but he preserved the town, and his family passed it on to the state of California. It's now California State Historical Park, and it is one of my favorite places to visit. And as a young girl once said, "Goodbye, God, I'm going to Bodie." Another newspaper reported that she said, "Good, by God, I'm going to Bodie." Take your pick, but if you ever find yourself on the eastern slope of the Sierra, visit Bodie. It's worth the trip.
Hello, I think I'm going to actually be one of the more technical ones today, somewhat by accident. So I wrote Kismet in about 2001, kind of been going on with development with that for the last, 15 years. It's kind of weird discovering your project's old enough to have a learner's permit now. And recently, with some changes in my jobs and whatnot, I've had to take a couple years off just because I was so swamped I didn't really have time for hobbies. And there's really nothing like taking a couple years off and going back and trying to fix some bugs to go, how did this work? How did this ever work? Why did I write this like that? This doesn't make any sense. It's also good, though, because it kind of gives you time to realize there's new ways to do things that, for example, with a lot of this code, it was written to work on P200 in, 2000, 2001. My phone now has more power than that computer did. I can compile the whole project in less time than it took to compile one file. So there's new ways to do things now. For example, with Kismet now, I'm restarting doing a web interface on it. So going from end curses to something that actually looks modern. But making all these changes dropped 14,000 lines of code so far. Just gone, code I didn't need anymore. So going back and looking at something that you did in the past, taking a little time off, getting a new perspective on it, suddenly you've got a new way to do things that might save you a ton of time in the future. So that's really all I had to say, a little bit quicker. Just that, maybe it's a good idea to take a little break, look at the way some other languages do things, some other projects do things, and then go back, look at your old code, see what you can change and improve, and see what's moved forward since you wrote it. A little emotional distance from when you wrote the code makes you feel really good about getting rid of 10,000 lines of crap you don't have to debug anymore. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Good morning. Well, in 2011, was erroneously diagnosed with diabetes. He got so scared about losing his family that he makes some drastic... Hello? Okay. He made drastic changes in his way of living. He quit definitely of kind of candies, sugar, and he began to exercise. He went to get a second opinion. Unfortunately, the first diagnosis was wrong, but he had already started with his new life, and he was not planning to leave it. Since then, my dad wakes up every day at 5, from Tuesday to Sunday, and he goes running, swimming, and biking. He has now participated in 3 triathlons, and well, he's my hero. One day, I decided to go with him and try one of those sports, and that's how I found my passion, running. What I love about running is that in the very moment I start my training, I forget about everything. It's just me, my music, and the road. I like that no matter for how long I've been running, I always find a new challenging tracking, and I always push myself to go farther and faster. I love and enjoy the sensation left after finishing each training or race, that tightness you feel that lets you know that you gave your best, and the promise that on the next run, I will beat my own record. It's been 5 years since my first run, but it has not been easy. 6 months after starting training, I got injured from my knee. I went to the doctor, and he told me that I would be needing therapy to help it heal, and also that it would be necessary to quit running for some time, and if it didn't get better, I would have to definitely stop running. Fortunately, After a year of retirement, my knee got better and I was able to continue running. And now I'm about to run my first 4.9-mile race. And next month, it will be my first 6.2-mile race. The best things in life are for free. And running is one of those things. Because you just need a pair of shoes, determination, and passion to start doing it. I like running because the limit is just determined by you. You decide how long and how fast are you going, no matter if it's your first or your 1,000th race. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Balint, one of the developers behind Wireshark. So we create all the bugs you report to us, and we don't fix those to annoy you. But one of the aim of this great conference, apart from learning about Wireshark, is getting to know each other better. So we have such a short time for that. So I borrowed Peter Thiel's idea about getting to know someone's character quickly. This is the interview question he asks to every applicant. What is something you believe that nearly no one agrees with you on? That's an excellent question because, first, this belief must be strong enough to keep it against strong peer pressure. Second, probably you gave it enough thought to consider that you were wrong, and you still believe in that. For me, this something would have been very different past year, but 1.5 years ago, I read Ray Kurzweil's excellent book called The Singularity is Near. It's about the technological singularity. The technological singularity is the event or point in time when the human brain, our current human brain, can't keep up with the advances of technology. It's somewhere there, of the scale. It may sound impossible to reach, right? There must be someone actually understanding the technology we are developing collaboratively. But if we consider that we can create an AI system which can improve itself, we can follow the train somewhere there in a few decades. So, can it be done? By brute force method, theoretically it can be done. We have a specific amount of neurons with a specific amount of connection between them in our brains that says 10 on something. And we have computers improving every year, every decade. And you see the calculations per second for $1,000 is improving very quickly. So in a few decades, we will be there. We can simulate a whole brain on a computer costing $1,000. And they can learn from each other. They can find out a new series and come up with new ideas like us if we can simulate the brain accurately. But we don't have to do that. We already have computers playing chess against us, beating us miserably. This year we got Google getting a computer playing Go, beating champions. Okay, not in all games, but let's say next year, maybe the year after the next year, we get that. Those AIs are called the narrow AI, where we simulate a specific cognitive function of the brain and implement that better than the human brain. For example, my smartphone drives better than me in traffic because it tells the correct route to the destination. And it doesn't annoy me. It's an extension of my brain. Luckily, we don't have to compete with those AIs, nor the narrow AI, nor the general AI. General AI would be the AI which thinks like us. The simulated brain Oh, wow, we have such a short time. Okay, the simulated brain. So we can extend our brains easily. Let's see with narrow AI software. For example, let's see Wireshark. In one click, you can download Wireshark, and you get decades of experience with protocols. In no time, you can tell which packet is wrong without reading any RFCs, just from the expert info. If you use Lua, you can extend Wireshark. It's an extension of your brain. Your code becomes part of your brain because you know about it, you know how to use that, and if you invest enough time, you can be really great and really fast at solving problems. Like when you learn something new, like playing an instrument. But when will this happen? The previous slide didn't give us too much answer. Hey, it's going up somewhere there, right? But we plot it on a different scale, where the x shows the time between two time-changing events. And the other scale is the, This is the time before prevalence. So it's minus t, and the time between two life-changing events in technology. We are there. So we are in the Computer History Museum. We can see all those nice achievements of the humanity, and what we can expect is even more in the next coming decades. So let's prepare. There are wonders ahead. In the next decades, more than humanity ever experienced before, and extend your brain with Wireshark on something else in your field. Thank you very much.
Which computer is it? This one? Okay. All right. Oh, what's happening? Oh, okay. Just don't start the timer yet, please. I haven't started. I'm nervous. My hands are sweaty. I don't know what's happening. And Janice said she'd kill me if I went over 5 minutes. So just don't start the timer, okay? It's like I felt like I was on The Price is Right. Come on down. You're the next contestant. Oh, Janice is going to kill you. I'll bid $1. Okay, can you count me down? Like 5, 4, so we can be on the same page? I know exactly what my time is.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
In the fall of 2005, I spent the most anxious, nerve-wracking week of my life. Because that was the entire week leading up to my very first improv comedy performance. The whole week I had this huge pit in my stomach. And like an hour before the show, I was sure I was going to throw up. I didn't. I did not. And after I went on stage, did the show, and I came off the stage, I was riding this huge wave of just elation and just this great high. I spent the next few years studying improv. Work took me to New York City. I studied the Upright Citizens Brigade Comedy Theater. And so I'm going to talk about some skills that I learned in my time. I haven't done it probably for over 6 years, but the skills that I learned in that time, I think, are useful for your life. So this is a little talk about comedy. It's not a funny talk. There's no jokes. See, I told you, it's not funny. Okay, so number one, maybe you've heard this before. The first rule of improv is yes and. So the opening statement is called an offer. So if you in the scene, you need to accept what your partner says, because now that is reality. That is truth. If I say, oh, this bridge is rickety, and the person says, no, that's not a bridge, you're walking on lava. You just denied my reality. You're tearing down the scene instead of adding to it and agreeing with the reality that I've presented. So, in your life, you don't have to agree with everything someone says, but have an open mind. Approach it with people with respect. Number two, listen and be in the moment. You can't be in the past. You can't be in the future. But we live there a lot of times. I mean, how many of you are, you're thinking about this morning, or you're thinking about what's going to happen later today, but you're supposed to be listening to me right now. So you have to listen, you have to be in the moment. The person who's talking, you have to be keyed in on what they're saying, because the smallest little thing that they could say, you might put it in your pocket and pull it out later, and it's going to kill. And if you've been in any kind of serious relationship, you know how important listening is. And if you don't, you're probably not in that relationship anymore. Number 3, how am I doing? Are we good? Any notes? Okay, number 3 is play for the good of the group and not yourself. If I step out and I go, scalpel, you know who I am, where I am, and what I'm doing. That is a brilliant opening. I mean, I think I've still got it. And if someone else steps out and says, well, here's your toilet plunger, you might get a cheap laugh, but at the expense of your scene partner and the scene, so fuck you. Play for the good of the group and not yourself. Number 4, follow your fear. If there's something that you've wanted to do, but you're afraid to try to do it, you're afraid you're going to fail, that you're going to look stupid, say a joke that doesn't land, whatever it is, that's what you got to do. That's true in improv, and I think that's very true in life. Number 5. What is number 5? Oh yeah. The best things that happen on stage and in life are unplanned. They're unscripted. If you step out into a scene with your next 5 moves planned in advance, you might get one in. You cannot control your scene partner. You cannot control the scene. And if you try to do it, you're going to fail, and it's going to be bad. So, let go. Surrender to the moment. And the best things that happen on the stage and in life are not planned. And frankly, the mistakes you make many times are a gift. I don't know if you've experienced that in life. I know I have. Where the mistakes you make, man, they turn out to be some of the best things that can happen. So, there's my 5 things. If you have the opportunity, I would encourage you to check out, go back, look for a local improv team, troupe, whatever they might call it. Go attend a show. They're a lot of fun. They probably have like an open class or something you could attend for free just to get your feet wet. You'll be terrified, but do it anyways. It's fun. You'll learn some things. You'll learn things about yourself. And I think you can apply that to your life. I know I have. Again, I haven't done it in, many years, but I think it's informed my life for many years now. So I encourage you to do that. So I'm thinking I'm seeing a 0, so I guess I'm going over 5 minutes. If I don't show up for my presentation, you know what happened to me.
Each of us, ever since we were knee-high to a grasshopper, have been told by our parents, our elders, that everyone matters, everyone is important. But for a few moments today, I'd like to take that and flip it on its ear and be very selfish in orient. In other words, maybe people are important because they have value or could have value to me. Before my wife traveled with me as frequently as she does, I used to love going to conferences that were in large properties like big Marriotts, maybe 30, 40 stories. Because off hour after the conference, I would never leave the building. I would just be nosy. I'd meet the chefs. I'd meet, the people that handled cleaning the rooms. But the funniest, the coolest people on the property were always the bellhops. And it would be so funny because I would be in technical sessions all day, and then I'd go make a beeline to the bellhops. And we'd just sit there and talk and laugh. And the guys at the conference, and I mean that to be gender inclusive, would always ask, why are you hanging out with the bellhops? I said, because they're a whole lot funnier than you are. And so on this one particular instance, I was talking with this bellhop, and he was going on and on, asking about what I did. And like most of you in the room, I just say I work on computers, because if you start talking about network analytics, people get a little cross-eyed. Well, he was an aspiring musician, and we just had a really good time that week. And he says, you really need to meet my brother. And I was like, yeah, that's great. That'd be great. I'd like to meet your brother. He said, no, you really need to meet my brother. I said, all right, that's cool. So I left, and about 3-4 weeks later, I get a phone call. And I answered the call, and the gentleman said, are you Boyd Stevens? I said, yes, I am. He says, well, I'm Professor Johnson. I said, nice to meet you, Professor Johnson. I said, how may I help you? He says, well, this is a little awkward. He says, you met my brother. And so I'm just going through my database of who could his brother have been. He says, well, I don't know what you do. He says, but my brother works as a bellhop at a property that you recently visited. And he came back and he told me, I have no idea what this guy does, but you really need to call him. And so he did. And our business did work for that university for about 10 years. On another occasion, one of the more polarizing figures in this country, Minister Louis Farrakhan, was visiting my home state, Alabama. Think for a moment. The leader of the Nation of Islam visiting Alabama. And it made all the headlines, all the newspapers, everyone was just up in an uproar. And he was visiting one of the local universities, and it was around that time my older sister called me and said, hey, can you come home this particular weekend? She lived about 2.5 hours from where he was visiting. And I said, for what? She said, just come home. Well, anyway, the minister went to the university, didn't get to speak, and a lot of people were disappointed. I didn't go, but when I visited my sister's home that weekend, guess who was there for dinner? The minister, Louis Farrakhan. So I'm sitting there scratching my head and trying to figure out what's the connection? And so the minister said, for 30 years, there's a guy in Chicago that cuts his hair. And every week he goes in to get his hair cut, the guy talks about his sister. On and on and on about his sister. And he told the guy the next time that he was in Alabama, he was going to visit his sister, who happened to be my brother-in-law's mother. Everyone is important. But then there are benefits. A few years back, we were trying to make a business decision about partnering with a company. And the CEO of that firm was hounding me, constantly calling. And so I just took a break, and I was at a conference about 800 miles away. And during that conference, I'm sitting there, and I met a guy the first day of the conference, and we kind of hit it off. We're best of friends now. But the last session of that conference, he was doing a workshop. And during his workshop, he looked at me, and he says, hey, Boyd, this is what we were talking about earlier in the week. Well, there are about 200 people in the room, and as I'm packing up my grip, this elderly gentleman of European descent is standing over me. And he said, hi, Boyd. My name is Boyd. I don't know if you know this, but we Boyd first namers have a little joke going on. I've met maybe 5 in my life. And we're sitting there talking, and we're just really getting engaged, and I learned to really, as the gentleman said earlier, look people in the eye and listen to what they're saying. And he starts talking about his company and how his daughter had gotten sick, and the people of the company wanted to, when he came back, wanted to kick him out of his own business. And he just went on and on and on, and I'm sitting there, I'm listening. I said, and so just out of courtesy, I said, what's the name of the firm? It was the name of the firm that wanted to do business with us. Everybody is important. And finally, you'll come to Wireshark or SharkFest for the first time. And you're sitting down, and, I don't wear lanyards purposefully. And you meet people that need help, and you try to help them. And they turned out to be a guy named Hansing that you were feeling sorry for because of his technical needs. Everybody is important.
Hi, good morning. My name is Jorge Flores, and I work at UNICEF. And for the few of you that might not know what UNICEF is, it's a UN agency that our main mission is to look for children or their mothers everywhere in the world, like in any country, to be sure that they have basic services. So this story happens in a small town in Afghanistan that is called Herat, which is in the border between Turkmenistan and Iran. During early 2002, I was part of a telecoms team that we supposed to go to every single village that was kind of big and important because there was an official emergency declared in Afghanistan to help. and I was assigned to that site. So this used to be a very small office, like 5 people, and suddenly, after they tried to get rid of the Taliban, and you had these huge bombardings, then every city was in a very bad state, and we had to install the infrastructure for networks and internet for more or less between 100 and 150 people, after they were only 5 in that office. So this story is about that. It's about installing there a VSAT station and the network. So during that time, the company called Telenor, which is Norwegian, they offer UNICEF that if we contract their services or buy a VSAT with them, they will give free of charge another VSAT. And of course, that just triggered a huge amount of requests for VSAT installations all over the country. The bad side of the story is that whenever you requested a group of specialized engineers to do the commissioning of your VSAT, you had a waiting time of 3 months. So before you do an installation, you have to go and look into the basic survey and foundation of where you are going to sit the antenna. And when I was doing this basic checking, one by one, checking what was done, I started checking the grounding, because this is one of your basic things. If you don't have proper grounding, then you don't have electrical difference, and then it's impossible to measure properly the voltage, and then you cannot transmit. When I was checking at the foundation, I had no grounding there. So I was lucky because there were some locals that they were involved in the original building of the structure of the foundation. And then I took the technical paper and went one by one the steps with them. And then we reached the point of, what did you do in this part on the grounding with the copper bars? How did you install them and grid them that they come to these wires? And then the guy, he looks at me and says, this is very interesting what you are asking, because copper is quite expensive and it's difficult to find around here. So we decided to change, instead of copper, we installed galvanized pipes that we use for water. And then, of course, when you install these, after 2-3 months, this galvanized metal polarized with the ground, and basically there is no ground. And that was the whole thing of the problem. So more or less at the same time, we received a confirmation from Telenor that we were assigned an engineer to do the installation in 10 days. So in 10 days, we were waiting for the guy to come. So of course, this became like our highest priority to contact. Our main office was in Islamabad because you didn't have any commercial flights or any other thing that UN and military flights inside Afghanistan. So I called Islamabad and told them, look, we need these copper bars. And they said, okay, give us a day. Next day I called and they said, we have to buy them either from Dubai or from Bangkok, so you can have them in about 2 months. And so, as you might know, it was difficult. So thinking about the problem 1 or 2 days, there is something aside happening at the same time in this story, and is I love Coca-Cola. I don't know how many of you do, but I really feel the difference with Pepsi Cola. And then at that time in there, Pepsi Cola is associated with the Arab world, but Coca-Cola at that time in that location was associated with Israel. So it was difficult to find unless you go to the black market. So I used to go every weekend or every 2 weekends to the black market to buy my Coca-Colas with the help of my assistant, because he was the translator, of course. And just going to buy my things, I passed there, and then I saw these huge rolls of high voltage cable in one of the shops. And this is the type of rolls that after you have a big issue in any country, they will go and cut from the public infrastructure and then sell it. So I went there and I asked him, can you please ask two things to the owner of the shop? One is that he allows me to cut a small piece, and that he tells you now how much is he selling each meter. So he told the price. That was just to ensure that later on they will not just try to make a fortune out of you. And when I cut the thing, it was pure copper. So that afternoon I went to my office, I explained the problem, I asked for the authorization, they gave me the funding. We went and bought these rolls of cables, because the moment that I saw it, I said, if we cut this cable, we take out the plastic, we cut it, and then here you have plenty blacksmith. I do a basic design, give it to a blacksmith, then we have our copper bars and the problem is solved. And my time is off. Sorry. So that's what we did. And then here is the ending result, like the cut things. We hired some local people to do the cutting. Finally, we got the copper that we needed. This is the basic design that was given to the blacksmith locally. This is what they did in one day. And then this is the final, like, precious copper bar that we needed. This is the modification that we did for the ground foundation. This is the proper installation and the help with the locals until we had a neat working VSAT, and it worked just perfectly. Thank you.
Good SharkBytes this year, huh? It's a tough act to follow. What sacrifices are you making for this? I'm going to explain myself. My wife and I, on Monday, we just got back from spending 1 month in Africa. We got to spend quite a bit of that time in Zimbabwe. Now, when you think about Africa, this is one of the pictures you probably think of. This guy followed our car for a little bit when we were on safari. I turned around and looked and I said, have you seen what's following us? Amazing, fantastic continent. Things I never thought I'd ever do. How about a selfie with the lion? Great stuff, good times, incredible experience. But you know what the best was? These people. The kids in Zimbabwe. They told me some stories about what they went through, what their parents went through back in the late 90s and through the early 2000s. Maybe you remember hearing about the hyperinflation problem that happened in Zimbabwe. In the late 90s, the dollar system that was used in Zimbabwe was pretty close to ours. You had ones, fives, tens, 20s. That was the currency that was being used. But in time, inflation in Zimbabwe got so bad. You think our inflation's bad? Check out some of these numbers. By the time it hit 2008, the government couldn't print bills big enough to keep up with the tremendous drop in their dollar. What went from ones, 20s, 100s, numbers you and I are used to, they started using $100,000 bills, $1 million bills. The biggest one I could find, this is, I took a picture of it too, $50 billion note. And you know what this would buy in 2008? If you went to the store for a loaf of bread, inflation was happening so fast, that loaf of bread might cost you $1 billion. You go back that same day in the afternoon, it went up to $10 billion. Things were happening so fast. People told us about how they would have to bring whole sacks of bills to buy dinners for their families. In fact, one of the people that I met told me a story about going and buying a roll of toilet paper. He unrolled that roll of toilet paper just for fun. He counted all the individual squares. And it took him more bills to buy the toilet paper than there were squares. So he told me, hey, why should I buy toilet paper? The government's giving it to me for free. You can guess what people started to use. So the point there, though, was he told me, you know, Chris, it's fascinating. Because what I learned is that I had all this money in my bank account that I'd spent years saving for. I sacrificed time with my wife, time with my family, teaching my son how to throw a baseball. I made all these sacrifices, and within just a few months, a few ships of the decimal point wiped it all out. I realized how many sacrifices I made for this. And it was the best thing for him because he really realized what was important and what he was prioritizing in his life. He began to be resourceful. He learned how to grow corn. He became the corn guy on his block. You learned how to make bread. You learned how to, you stored a bunch of meat or beef, and the barter system came out. So my question to you, and this is something that I've thought about since he told me that story. Could it happen to us? Ours is printed too. What am I sacrificing? What am I putting aside? What am I prioritizing in my life for what might eventually turn into this? So we can all ask ourselves that question. I'm not saying it will happen. It's possible. In Zimbabwe, they never thought they'd see a $50 billion note. But if it did happen to you, if everything was gone, ask yourself, what did you sacrifice for this? Thank you.